Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S exam prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the articles that we are going to cover. From today's newspaper, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed discussion. We have 2 articles, 2 very important columns, including an editorial that is extremely important for the mains exam. There is one topic from Indian polity and another topic from science and technology. Once we cover these articles in complete detail, we shall take a look at 5 more articles that are relevant for your prelims exam. So these are the discussions we'll be having today. And if you guys are liking the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, share these videos with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at this editorial from page number 6. This editorial is dealing with the topic of freedom of press. I'm sure you know that the freedom of press is a guaranteed fundamental right under the Indian Constitution. Of late, there have been certain developments which have been labeled as a threat to freedom of press, and they've also been seen as a threat to the freedom of expression, and as well as several journalists, they have raised concerns about their privacy being breached by various security agencies and law enforcement agencies. So these concerns have become quite serious because every now and then either police forces at the state level or even at the central level, law enforcement agencies like Enforcement Directorate or National Investigation Agency, etc., they've often conducted raids against media houses. Several journalists have been arrested on charges of terrorism, money laundering, etc. In these various investigations which are going on, the law enforcement agencies, they first confiscate the electronic devices belonging to the journalists, along with arresting the journalists and pressing charges against them, right, under serious laws such as the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So such serious charges, including terrorism, money laundering charges, have been brought up against several media houses, media professionals and journalists. In these cases, the journalists who have been charged and arrested, their electronic devices are seized by the law enforcement authorities as part of the investigation process. Because electronic gadgets today, they have become a daily part of our lives, right? They contain a lot of personal information and also a lot of data regarding your professional work. And in any such investigation, the electronic devices that you own becomes a key part of the investigation itself, as it can give a lot of evidence to the law enforcement agencies. But however, in cases involving journalists, media professionals, and even academicians, lawyers, etc., if law enforcement agencies, let's assume hypothetically, that these cases are politically motivated. Let's say there was a journalist who was criticizing the government and the ruling party. In order to curb criticism and target dissent and opposition, the government might misuse the law enforcement agencies to target that media outlet, to target those journalists. So in such cases, what if false allegations are made, false charges are brought up, and in these cases, not only the journalist gets arrested, but their electronic devices are seized, which constitutes a violation of the basic fundamental rights guaranteed to journalists or in general to citizens in the country. Of late, many such concerns have come up where apparently arbitrary arrests have happened. So as a result, several civil society activists and NGOs, they had filed a petition of the Supreme Court, that approached the Supreme Court, asking for some relief with regard to the powers of search and seizure, which is vested with law enforcement agencies. Along with arresting the accused, the law enforcement agencies will have the power to search, that is to search the property, to search any place where they can find evidence against the accused, and even to seize any material that could provide evidence against the accused to convict them in a court of law. So with regard to search and seizure powers, usually the concern is that in India, law enforcement agencies have been given tremendous powers. But to ensure that these powers are not misused, there have to be some checks and balances. With regard to arrest and detention, we have few checks and balances in the constitution itself and also in the legal framework that we have, in the criminal legal framework that we have. So similarly, with regard to the power to search and seize, there are few checks and balances. But every now and then, the police organizations and even other law enforcement agencies, they often violate these checks and balances, and it appears that the governments might be misusing some of the agencies to target journalists and media outlets. So those who had these concerns, they had approached the Supreme Court for curbs against the power to search and seize, especially the search and seizure of electronic devices belonging to journalists and media professionals. So in this particular case, the Supreme Court has recently passed a set of interim guidelines for seizure of devices in order to protect the digital privacy of journalists and to uphold the freedom of free press. Is that clear? So that is the context in which this editorial has been brought out by the Hindu. The concern here is that police and law enforcement agencies have often seized the personal electronic devices of journalists as well as academics, lawyers and media professionals in several cases. And the fear is that this could violate their basic fundamental rights. The unfettered power to search and seize allegedly has been misused as well for political reasons to curb dissent, to target the media and the opposition. So on these grounds, a batch of petitioners had approached the Supreme Court for relief, and the Supreme Court has brought out a set of interim guidelines and it has directed the government to come out with a policy, to come out with a legal framework to ensure that the power of search and seizure is not misused with regard to seizure of electronic devices. So these guidelines the Supreme Court is laying down, and the guidelines the government is expected to come out, they will help in creating a protection, a system of checks and balances for journalists. Now let's look at this in more detail. Let's understand what rights are getting violated in such cases, what concerns have been present, and what has the Supreme Court said about this. Now in this context, the fundamental rights which stand to be violated, if these allegations are true, would be freedom of free press and expression and right to privacy. Under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, right to free press, the right to free expression are guaranteed fundamental rights. But of course, they are not absolute fundamental rights. They do come with a set of reasonable restrictions. On certain grounds, for example, on the grounds of India's friendly ties with foreign countries, on the grounds of India's sovereignty and integrity, right? On certain grounds like these fundamental rights can be restricted, can be curbed by the state. Then coming to right to privacy. Right to privacy has been upheld as a fundamental right by the Supreme Court recently under Article 21 itself. Article 21, which is one of the most important fundamental rights, deals with right to life. So under the wider interpretation of right to life, the Supreme Court in 2017, in the K.S. Puttaswamy case, the K.S. Puttaswamy case is a landmark case in India. In this historic case, the Supreme Court upheld right to privacy of citizens as a fundamental right, which is enshrined under the provisions of Article 21 itself. So these are the basic fundamental rights which stand to be violated, including the right to livelihood of journalists when electronic devices are seized arbitrarily by the police and law enforcement agencies. Right to livelihood is also a guaranteed fundamental right under Article 19. You have a right to profession. Now, when police forces or when law enforcement agencies like Enforcement Directorate, right, when they are arresting the journalists and seizing their electronic devices, be it their smartphones, their laptops, etc., this will deprive the journalists of their right to work. This could even compromise their sources in the media world, sources are everything for journalists. That is where they source their information from, right? There could be a whistleblower in the government who's reaching out to a journalist to ensure that the lid on a corruption scandal is broken out, for example, right? Or there could be a government official who wants to blow the lid on a certain controversy, and they would be informing the journalists, but the code here is that, the basic code of conduct is that the identity of the source shall not be revealed. This is the very foundation of journalism. Journalists source information from different sources within the government, outside of the government. They'll be talking to various officials, leaders, and other sources. And this is the bedrock of media freedom, right? As you know, media is the fourth pillar in a democracy that brings transparency into the system and ensures accountability of the other organs of the state. So sources are extremely critical for journalists. Sources who are giving information, whistleblowers who are looking to blow the lid on scandals and controversies, they are sharing information with media professionals and journalists on the guarantee that their identity shall remain protected. If police and law enforcement agencies are seizing the devices of journalists, right, and especially if these cases are false or motivated, politically motivated, then the identity of the sources gets compromised and sources will not come ahead to speak to journalists and to give information to the media. So this could affect the very functioning of that media house. It could cripple the profession of the journalists, the concerned journalists, right? Their ability to work, their ability to source information to report to the public will get compromised, thereby affecting right to livelihood of journalists as well. So these are the basic rights that stand to be compromised. Is that clear? It could impede the job of the media, which is to report, to bring out information into the public domain, right? It could affect the sources. Their identity could get compromised. They could be targeted later when their identities are leaked or released later, right? And no one will come forward to speak to the media or inform the journalists about critical information. So it's in this context that the petitioners had urged the Supreme Court to intervene, to strike a balance and ensure that there are a set of guidelines regulating the power of search and seizure with regard to electronic devices of journalists who are accused by the law enforcement agencies. So in this case, the Supreme Court has made a very, very important observation. The Supreme Court has said, if police and law enforcement agencies are seizing electronic devices without checks and balances, right, and if there is no accountability here, then what's the point of declaring privacy as a fundamental right? This is what Justice Kaul has pointed out to the government of India. See, of course, police and law enforcement, they need the power of search and seizure. Or else how will they investigate? There could be journalists involved in anti-national activities. There could be journalists involved in money laundering scams or in terrorist activities as well, right? It's a possibility. In such genuine cases, the police and law enforcement will definitely need the powers to search and seize any evidence required, including electronic devices. But these have to be legitimate grounds. There has to be established prima facie evidence and legitimate grounds for such search and seizure to happen, and there should be a well laid out process. There should be accountability in the system, because if false cases are brought up against journalists, in such cases there should be a regulation of the power of search and seizure. Essentially, there should be a balance struck between the security needs of the country and the freedom of the media, the freedom of the journalists. That is exactly what the Supreme Court also has pointed out. The Supreme Court has said that just because police and law enforcement have tremendous powers to search and seize, doesn't mean they can violate fundamental rights. Doesn't mean they can file arbitrary cases, seize evidence and cripple the life of journalists, the work of journalists. They can't erode the freedom of press and freedom of expression. So that is why the Supreme Court has interfered, and it has brought out a set of basic interim guidelines, but it has left the task to the government itself to come out with a permanent set of guidelines. That is the job of the government, to create a guideline, a framework to restrict the misuse of search and seizure. Right? So Supreme Court doesn't want to step into the domain of the executive. It has only given a set of interim guidelines, and then it has left the matter to the center, but it has ordered the center, it has directed the center to come out with a set of permanent guidelines, to come out with the policy that is needed, the law that is needed to ensure that these powers are not misused. Now, let's say there is a mains question on this important topic. To bring a more wider discussion into it, it's always good to compare India's system with the global systems that are present in other democracies. So for that, let me give you the global context here. Let us see how the privacy of citizens, how press freedom is protected in other democracies like United Kingdom and United States. In similar cases, what provisions are present in US and UK to protect these basic fundamental rights. Now, if you look at search and seizure, the power to search and seize evidence, this is very strictly restricted in Western democracies. There are several constitutional and legal frameworks present to ensure that such powers are not misused by the police and law enforcement, especially when it comes to seizure of electronic devices, that too from media personnel. In the United States, the Privacy Protection Act forbids any search and seizure of material belonging to those involved in First Amendment activities. I hope you know about the First Amendment to the US Constitution. It provides constitutional protection to journalists, artists, academics, researchers, etc. Their right to free speech and expression, the right to free press, is guaranteed and protected through the First Amendment to the US Constitution. So those who enjoy this protection under the First Amendment, right, for them, the Privacy Protection Act gives almost complete protection from search and seizure of material in order to uphold the basic fundamental rights, mainly to uphold the freedom of the press, to uphold the freedom of the media. In the United Kingdom as well, there is a clear system where a judicial warrant is mandatory for any such search and seizure to occur. Even in genuine cases, if the police and law enforcement have to seize electronic devices from journalists, then they should first obtain a judicial warrant. They need to approach the magistrate, get the required warrants, and only then such devices can be seized. So there is a lot of protection available in UK and US, especially for journalists and the media, which is largely missing in India. Even though we do have some similar provisions, they're often bypassed, they're often not implemented and enforced because there is a lot of discretion provided to the police and law enforcement. Due to the broad provisions in the law, right, under stringent laws like PMLA, UAPA, etc., tremendous powers are given to law enforcement and police agencies. This is often misused by ruling parties to target critics and opponents in order to curb dissent. So this is where the concern lies in India, and that is why a set of guidelines are needed. A legal framework is needed to streamline this process. Of course, the law enforcement agencies need powers to search and seize evidence when required in genuine cases. At the same time, this should be balanced with the need to protect fundamental rights through a system of checks and balances. That is exactly what the editorial is pointing out. Is that clear? The editorial is suggesting that the government, which is now expected to come out with a set of permanent guidelines, should provide for mandatory judicial warrant to be obtained prior to seizing electronic devices from journalists. The editorial is also suggesting that journalists should not be forced to incriminate themselves or to give up their sources in ongoing investigations. This should be the job of the law enforcement agencies to prove the guilt of the accused. They shouldn't be forced to incriminate themselves or give witnesses against themselves or to compromise their sources, which threatens the very foundation of free media, which is a key pillar in a democracy. The editorial is also suggesting that there should be strict protocols with regard to the powers of search and seizure to safeguard digital data and digital privacy of the journalists. Right? There should be clear-cut guidelines for the police and law enforcement agencies that the digital data which has been seized should not be tampered with. Now, after you seize a phone or a laptop, the agency should not be planting evidence, false evidence to just incriminate the journalists. That should not happen. These devices will also have personal data belonging to the personal life of the journalists. Such personal data should not be leaked into the public domain. It should not be passed on to other third parties. You can't have any leaks into the media which could embarrass or harm the dignity of the accused. This has to be ensured through a strict set of protocols. Any data which is not needed for the investigation for that particular case should be deleted as well in a timely manner to uphold the right to digital privacy and digital protection for the journalists. These are basic guaranteed rights, and there needs to be a set of protocols to ensure that the power of search and seizure with regard to electronic devices is not misused to target journalists and media outlets. The editorial is also suggesting that, let's say a case has come up, right? Let's say there is a merit to the case. It appears to be a genuine case. Authorities have got the judicial warrant and they have every right to seize the electronic devices. But this should not affect the ability of the journalists to continue their work. Because see, in our system of legal jurisprudence, under the principles of natural justice which prevails in India, the accused is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Essentially, the burden of proof lies on the prosecution, lies on the investigating agencies. It's a job of the state, the prosecution and the law enforcement agencies to bring up the evidence to show that the accused is guilty. So until and unless that happens in a court of law, the day-to-day life of the journalists, right, unless and until they're not arrested, should be allowed to continue. If their devices are seized, right, that directly hampers the ability of a journalist to work. So what the editorial is suggesting is that today cloning technology is easily available. Devices can be cloned, data can be cloned. So instead of seizing the mobile phone and the laptop and permanently keeping it under the custody of the police, what they can do is they can simply make copies of the data, use it for investigation, while allowing the journalists to continue their regular work, which will not compromise their right to livelihood. Then similarly, there should be a system, a strict protocol to ensure that the devices being seized, right, they're well documented. A record has to be kept, right, a transparent record has to be kept regarding what devices have been seized and what evidence was found on it. Because later, what if, with a malintention, what if false evidence is planted on the device, right? Let's say the ruling party wants to target a particular journalist. They've used the police to target the journalist, got him arrested, seized the electronic devices, and later they might plant evidence to incriminate the journalist. To prevent this from happening, to prevent such misuse, there should be a strict protocol through which the device which is seized is recorded. The evidence found is also clearly recorded so that the court is completely in the know-how that the device has not been tampered with or false evidence has not been planted on it. These guidelines which the government is going to frame should be done by consulting all the stakeholders. Right? The government has to consult with legal experts, with the media itself. It has to engage with the media industry and other stakeholders, including civil society. It needs to hold public consultations, right? And even our law, our criminal justice legal framework that exists should be reformed, right? Right now, India is in the process of updating its criminal legal framework. The Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, which are of colonial origin, including the Indian Evidence Act, they're all being replaced with newer versions of the law being pushed by the Modi government. Right? Currently, these bills are being considered by the parliament. So we need to ensure that the power of search and seizure given to police and law enforcement agencies is kept under check. They need those powers to investigate. But however, there should be a balance. These powers should not be misused to violate fundamental rights. That balance has to be struck, and Accordingly, the laws, if required, also have to be updated along with bringing out these guidelines that the Supreme Court has mandated. Is that clear? So this is the important understanding that you need to get from this editorial. It's a big topic actually. You can get a mains question on this in Indian polity. Now let's move on to another important column on page number 9. That is from Science and Technology. This article examines the role of electric battery in today's economy. Today, the industry, the world will not function without electric batteries. The future of the industry, the future of the economy is dependent heavily on electric batteries, right? So it's very important to understand the technology behind it. How does it work? At least the basics, right? You don't have to become an expert here, but at least understanding the basics of an electric battery. What are the components? What is the chemical reaction involved in an electric battery, right? What is the historical background related to its invention? And what role is it playing in the economy today? And why do companies place such a big priority on electric batteries for the future? So that is something we need to understand, which is a very important topic for UPSC exams as well. So let's take a look at this important topic. Today, electric batteries, right? They come in all sizes. They're portable. They're rechargeable. They can hold a lot of charge. They've become very efficient. So most all electronic devices, gadgets, then even your cars, buses, trucks today are being driven by electric batteries, right? Today, electric batteries are the focus of innovation because to reduce emissions, to reduce the dependency on fossil fuels, and to shift towards electric mobility, to adopt electric transportation, there is a lot of priority being given to electric battery technology. Correct? So it has become the foundation of the modern industry in many ways. We are already dependent on electric batteries to drive various industrial processes, to drive transportation, and even all our devices, gadgets, and accessories. From your laptops to mobile phones to your headphones, right? Every device that we use, every gadget that we use, various processes in the industry as well, right? They all rely on electric batteries to provide portable electric power, which is driving these industrial activities. So it's in this context that you should be familiar with the invention of the electric battery, the brief history behind it for your prelims, and the components of a battery and the basic chemical process involved through which electricity is generated or electric current is generated by an electric battery. You should also be familiar with the major types of batteries that we have today, the modern batteries that have come up, right, from lithium ion to your fuel cells, and you should understand their role in the economy and what potential they have for the future. So let's take a look at this one by one. First, let's look at the background. Of course, the background is not very important. You need not mug up everything here. But in case there is a prelims question concerning the invention of the electric battery, you never know, UPSC might go into that detail, right? UPSC is known to surprise us. Given the role of electric batteries today and the potential of electric batteries in the future, there could be a question on the invention of the electric battery itself, not just on the technology. So please note down that the invention of the electric battery largely took place in Europe. In the 1700s, in 1780, Luigi Galvani, an Italian chemist and a researcher, he touched two plates of different metals together and connected this to the leg of a frog. And he noticed that the leg of the frog was twitching. The frog's leg contracted when it came in contact with this assembly that he had created, where two metallic plates had been merged together, had been touched together. But he couldn't explain the phenomena. He couldn't explain what was happening. He couldn't understand the concept of electric current. He couldn't understand the flow of electrons. But this was one of the first initial experiments, right, that laid the foundation for electric battery technology. Later, the next major development happened in the pre-industrial era itself. In 1800, Alessandro Volta, after whom voltaic pile or voltaic cells is named after, he came up with the first initial version of a voltaic pile. He built a cell consisting of copper and zinc plates, which even today is the basis of your electrochemical batteries. Right? All the basic electrochemical batteries that we have been using since many decades, they're built on the very same concept which Alessandro Volta worked upon. Right? He created the first voltaic cell where he placed copper and zinc plates in alternating fashion, creating a battery cell. They were separated by sheets of paper that were soaked in a salty water, which would act as an electrolyte medium. And he found out that this arrangement, this particular setup, was generating a steady stream of current, a stream of electrons basically. See what happens in a battery essentially. In a battery, there is basically a flow of electrons. When you tap into this electric current, when you connect an external circuit to tap into the flow of electrons, this will end up powering this device, whatever device you connect to it. That is the core foundation of battery technology. Right? You use these battery cells comprising of different metals, which has components like anode, cathode, and an electrolyte. Right? This assembly, battery assembly, generates a stream of electrons, a stream of electric current, and you tap into it by connecting an external circuit, and the device which is connected will be powered by the stream of electric current. So Alessandro Volta, who built the voltaic pile, right, he demonstrated the flow of current, but again he couldn't explain the process. He couldn't explain the theory behind it. Then came John Daniel, who used a copper pot placed in a copper sulfate solution, and he placed this inside an earthen pot containing a zinc electrode which was sitting inside sulfuric acid. He basically created the first complex setup of an anode cathode sitting in an electrolyte solution. This produced a steady stream of electric current for a much longer duration that could last for a longer time. But again, he couldn't provide the complete theoretical explanation to it. Then came Michael Faraday. Since our school days, we have studied that Michael Faraday was the one who laid the foundation of battery technology in the early 19th century. He would go on to explain the concept of electron flow that happens in a battery cell, how electrons move from within the anode cathode system through the electrolyte medium, and how it can generate a steady stream of electric current. Right? Meaning it could hold electric charge, release that charge over a long period of time, which could power electronic devices, electronic and electrical devices. So this is how the initial foundation was laid for the electric battery industry. So this process is the electrochemical process. These initial battery cells that came out, right, which was widely used in 1800s, 1900s, even today, right, several devices are still powered by these basic voltaic electrochemical cells. They became the foundation of the battery industry. It revolutionized the battery industry. With advances in technology and better material being used, right, the size was brought down, the shelf life of the batteries were increased, right, batteries could hold more charge and they could release the charge slowly. Even that is important, they shouldn't lose the charge quickly, right. Then came rechargeable batteries as well. So this has completely transformed the industry itself, right, with far-reaching consequences, which affects you even your day-to-day life and even the economy. Now, if you look at a voltaic cell, galvanic cell, or any such basic assembly of a battery cell, they all undergo redox reactions, which is a combination of oxidation and reduction reactions. When oxidation, reduction, when both reactions are occurring, we call this as a redox reaction. Now, if you look at the basic composition of a battery cell, of your electrochemical battery cell, it comprises of two half cells that are depicted in this image over here. You can see here in this image, which depicts the two half cells. So Michael Faraday laid down the clear components of such a battery cell. He identified the anode, where the oxidation reaction takes place, the cathode, where the reduction reaction takes place. Now, if you assume a setup like this given in the image, let's say there is a metal electrode immersed in a electrolyte of that same metal. Okay, let's say there is a zinc electrode placed in a zinc sulfate solution that you're seeing here, which comprises your anode. You can see the zinc electrode here placed in a zinc sulfate solution. Next, you have a copper electrode in a copper sulfate solution. You can see that here on the side of the cathode. A copper rod, a copper electrode placed in a solution of copper sulfate. Now, let us say you connect the two metal electrodes with a wire, and the two tubs which are carrying the electrolyte solutions, they are connected by a salt bridge. You can see the salt bridge here. Salt bridge of potassium chloride is used to connect the electrolytes. Basically, a salt bridge, it can conduct the ions that are moving from one cell to the other without compromising the flow of electrons, because a salt bridge is electrically neutral. It does not interfere with the flow of electrons, the flow of ions. All right. Now, in this assembly setup where these two half cells are brought together, where the electrodes are connected with a wire, you will see that there will be a steady stream of electrons because of the redox reaction, because of the oxidation taking place at the anode, which is the negative charge of the half cell, and the reduction reaction at the cathode on the positive side of the half cell. So if you tap a external device, right, if you place a external circuit here, connect this to the wire on the same technology, the same process. Now here, please understand, for the sake of basic science where prelims questions can come, the cathode is the positively charged electrode here, right? The copper electrode is the cathode, which has the positive charge, the one to which electrons are arriving. Essentially, electrons are flowing from the anode towards the cathode here. Now, the anode, which is the negatively charged electrode, is the one supplying the electrons. So get these basics right. Because of the oxidation happening at the anode, electrons from the zinc electrode is getting oxidized and flowing towards the other half cell. Now, these electrons are received on the other side, towards the cathode end. So this oxidation reaction where electrons are released and the reduction reaction where they are consumed, this constitutes your basic redox reaction in a electrochemical cell. Is that clear? This is the very basic process and the technology involved in your batteries. But today, the world has changed. With the arrival of lithium-ion batteries, the world has seen a remarkable transformation. In fact, lithium-ion batteries are such a revolutionary technology that the developers of lithium-ion battery were awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2019. That is the significance of this technology. The previous voltaic cells and electrochemical batteries, they had a lot of disadvantages, right? They could generate only basic minimal voltage of 1.5 volts, 3 volts, 9 volts, etc. Those batteries couldn't last longer, right? Their charging cycle would be longer, discharge cycle would also be shorter. And essentially those older batteries, they were not efficient to be used in modern industry for modern devices. That is where lithium-ion battery makes a big difference. Today, lithium is a critical mineral which is absolutely strategic for any country because very few countries have lithium resources, right? It plays a critical role in many sectors from space to defense to electronics industry. So as these batteries are becoming more popular, right? They're being used in almost in every industry, in every technology. The future will be based on lithium-ion batteries. The future will be based on other new battery technologies coming up, which drives your electric vehicles, right? From cars to bikes to buses. Today, electric vehicle technology has become the focus for future urban transportation because the goal is to achieve emission reduction, move away from fossil fuels, and rely on electric vehicles, electric transportation. In this context, lithium-ion battery technology is extremely crucial and critical. That is why the development of the lithium-ion battery was awarded with the Nobel Prize for Chemistry because of its revolutionary impact on today's global economy. Now, in your regular voltaic cells, your electrolytic cells that we saw, the voltaic cell is converting chemical energy to electrical energy, right? Electrolytic cell converts the electrical energy back to chemical energy. A combination of the two, a combination of voltaic electrolytic cell is your rechargeable battery. Basically, on one end, there is an uptake of electrons which leads to the charging of your battery, and on the other side, there is a discharge of the electric current. So, these are the rechargeable batteries which transformed the battery industry. Now, if you look at your mobile phones, your smartphones, the compact batteries that provide almost 1 day or even 2 days of full power to your phone, they're largely based on lithium-ion polymer cell. Within the lithium-ion domain, there are many different variants that have come up, right? Previously, we had nickel-cadmium batteries as well, along with your zinc-copper batteries. Even zinc-copper is very old, outdated technology. It's usually nickel-cadmium batteries which became the basic foundation of the battery industry, right? Which provided a combination of voltaic and electrolytic cells that could be rechargeable as well. But today we have largely moved on towards the lithium battery world, and there are many different variants available. For example, the lithium batteries used in your electric vehicles are different compared to the lithium batteries used in your laptops, your mobile phones, your cameras. So smartphones largely use a polymer cell, a lithium-ion polymer cell, where lithium is the metal oxide, which is the cathode. Graphite acts as the anode. Graphite is another critical mineral, right? Mainly because of their application in the lithium industry, in the lithium battery industry. The electrolyte here is a semi-solid polymer gel, and a microporous polyethylene is used to separate the two half cells. These batteries are extremely efficient when it comes to their charging cycles, their ability to last a longer time, the ability to charge quickly and discharge slowly, right? So this is what makes all the new technologies possible, all the new devices and gadgets possible. So along with your lithium-ion batteries, today you have fuel cells as well, which are becoming the foundation of the electric vehicle industry. Now, for example, if you look at the current electric vehicle models available, like the Tesla Model S cars, which are powered by the P85 battery, it primarily uses a very complex lithium-ion cell assembly. The battery in the Tesla model almost weighs half a ton, almost 500 kilograms. But look at the energy output. It is massive. This lithium-ion cell can produce 8,090 kilowatts per hour. It consists of more than 18,000 lithium-ion cells. That is how efficient and massive these batteries have become. Is that clear? Of course, the size is compact. The size is compact enough to drive a car, and it provides enough mileage to easily drive the car anywhere between 300 to 500 kilometers. Now, this is becoming the industry standard. Just like a full tank of petrol diesel can take you up to, let's say, 400 to 500 kilometers. Similarly, battery technology is matching up to these levels. Today, vehicles can easily go up to 300, 500 or even slightly above. And that is why the focus of electric transportation is lithium-ion battery technology. The other batteries being focused upon would be the fuel cells, like your hydrogen fuel cell. Right? Hydrogen is a very clean, efficient fuel. If you can split hydrogen into protons and electrons and drive an electric current, right? It can be very clean, very efficient because the byproduct is simply water. Right? It only produces heat and water. This electrolytic reaction where hydrogen, right, in a hydrogen fuel cell, at the anode there is a catalyst that breaks hydrogen into protons and electrons, creating the stream of current. It's a very efficient, clean reaction where only heat and water is released as the output. Zero pollution, zero emissions, but enough electricity to drive your transportation. So these fuel cells are also becoming the norm in the battery industry, in the electric mobility transportation industry. That is why hydrogen economy is also a key component of the future. If you look at the future of battery cells, right, be it lithium-ion batteries and all the variants of lithium-ion batteries, or even other fuel cells that power electric vehicles, right? Of course, they have a lot of advantages, disadvantages. Each variant has a different advantage, a different disadvantage. So depending on the application, depending on the industry where it is being used, the appropriate variants are used. Like in the electric and the electronic industry, in mobile phones, laptops, usually lithium-ion variants are preferred. In the electric vehicle industry, there is a preference for both lithium-ion cells and even for fuel cells. Both are becoming popular. There are hybrid cells as well which are available, right? So today, these are the technologies which are driving the battery technology, and they are set to become the future as well. That is why India has launched a very, very important mission. This year, we launched the National Green Hydrogen Mission to transform India into a global hub to produce and export green hydrogen that could become the fuel of the future to drive urban transportation, right? India is also focusing on lithium-ion battery technology. In fact, our public institutions like ISRO, DRDO, they're already pioneering lithium-ion technology. The only challenge here is that these are critical resources. Be it lithium, be it graphite, both are very crucial for these batteries. But the availability of these resources is very limited in the world. India has very, very limited lithium graphite reserves. We need to depend on other countries. We need to depend on imports. Countries like China already dominate the supply chain of lithium and lithium-ion batteries, right? Now, India doesn't want to be in a situation where we are extremely dependent on hostile countries like China for such critical resources and critical technology. So this is where India has plans to diversify its sourcing of lithium and graphite, right? We are working with South American countries, with United States and other major countries which have the reserves, striking deals with them, right? We're working with Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Chile, the United States, few African countries, even Australia, right? We are trying to create parallel supply chains and secure enough raw material to drive the future of battery technology in India. In fact, in today's newspaper, there is another important article related to this, right? I'll come to that later in the prelim section. So getting hold of these critical resources is important. Then creating the whole ecosystem, driving research and innovation, right? Creating independent supply chains which are not dependent on China or one supplier. Diversifying our supply chains and ensuring that the batteries become more efficient and safer so that in the future we can move away from fossil fuels and achieve our climate goals, right? Under Paris Agreement, we have committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, right? We are focused on moving away from fossil fuels, adopting clean renewable energy. India has a major mission, the National Electric Mobility Mission, right? We are planning to switch towards electric mobility in the future to move away from internal combustion engines. So to achieve this transformation in the economy, these technologies are going to be extremely crucial. That is why battery technology, electric battery technology, has not only driven innovation in the industry, but it is also going to drive the future of innovation as well. Is that clear? So a country's sovereignty, national security, economy, and our general well-being is tied to this critical technology. That is why battery technology is one of the key focus technologies for all the major powers around the world. Is that clear? So this completes my detailed discussion of all the important mains articles. Now let's take a quick look at the smaller prelims articles in today's newspaper. On page number 8, the Hindu makes a mention of a separatist movement in Spain. Some of you might be surprised by this. Usually separatism, such internal divisions and conflicts, they are the feature of developing and underdeveloped countries. But Spain, as you know, is a developed nation, part of the European Union. But yes, even Spain has an internal problem. There is a region in Spain called Catalonia. See, this article itself is not important for the exam. The article is referring to a political development where the left-wing party, which has taken the lead in the recent Spanish elections, has offered a amnesty for a separatist leader. In Catalonia region, there is a separatist movement, right? And following the recent elections, there has been a hung parliament. No single party has gained the lead. Both left and right-wing parties, they have been stuck. There is a political stalemate. So to ensure that a government is formed and to draw support from other smaller parties, the leader of Spain, the current left-wing prime minister who heads a left-wing government, has offered a deal, an amnesty deal for separatist leaders like Carles Puigdemont. Following this, all the cases of separatism and terrorism that is present against Catalonian separatists will be waived off by the government in return for support for forming a government. Essentially, separatists are being brought into mainstream political process. So this has triggered a political controversy in Spain. Is that clear? But however, the development itself is not important. The political development of Spain is not directly relevant for the exam. That's why I told you the article itself is not important. But this region where separatism is seen in Spain can be important for prelims. You should know where is Catalonia located. In which part of Spain is there a separatist movement, a secessionist movement going on? Right? The history of this movement goes all the way back to 19th century. But it prevails even now, especially in 2017. In Catalonia, a referendum was also held. Referendum is a direct election calling for the breakaway of Catalonia from Spain. Following this referendum, Spain had cracked down on these separatists, the Catalonian separatists, and since then, they have been facing these criminal charges and terrorism charges. Now, the left government is looking to waive off these charges to get coalition support from the parties, the regional parties in Catalonia, which means even separatists will be pardoned and they'll become part of the government. So that is why the political controversy has come up. So please look at the map. This is where Catalonia is located. It's in the northeast region of Spain, bordering France. Is that clear? This is where Catalonia is located. This is where the major city of Barcelona is located. I'm sure many of you would know about Barcelona, either because of its tourist potential or because of the football club. Now, I'll give you a small assignment, a small exercise. Find out which is this water body. Which is this water body that faces the Catalonia region of Spain? Find this out and mention that in the comments below. Let's see how many of you can get this right. So based on such events in global geopolitics, UPSC might ask map-based geography questions. Right? UPSC might ask in which part of Spain there is a separatist movement going on. Or Catalonia borders which country, right? Or it faces which sea or which water body. Such basic questions can be asked, so you have to be familiar with this. So please take this exercise. Find out which is this water body here. Next, on page number 12, we have another article from International Relations. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is traveling to Indonesia tomorrow. He'll be traveling to Jakarta to participate in the ADMM Plus meeting. Indonesia is currently hosting the ADMM Plus meeting, and India is one of the participants in the ADMM Plus meeting. So you should understand what is ADMM, what is ADMM Plus, who are the members, what is its importance. ADMM stands for ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting. I'm sure you know about ASEAN Group, which is a regional grouping of Southeast Asian countries. Right? The ASEAN Group consists of 10 Southeast Asian countries. These are the 10 Southeast Asian countries which are part of ASEAN. Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, etc. So these 10 countries from Southeast Asia are part of this important political economic grouping, right? And they have a separate defense ministers engagement which is called ADMM, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, Basically, the defense ministers of these 10 ASEAN countries, they meet every year to discuss the security issues of the region. They mainly focus on counter-terrorism, tackling organized crime, maritime security, etc. Because in Southeast Asia, there are many security challenges. For example, Southeast Asia is home to the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle region comprising of Myanmar, Thailand and Laos. The Golden Triangle region is a hub of organized crime. It's a major global hub of drug and narcotics production. And you also find arms trafficking, wildlife trafficking to be very rampant here in the Golden Triangle. This allows even terror and insurgent groups to thrive in the region, right? India itself is affected by the Golden Triangle. The northeast of India, right, is directly affected by the drug trafficking, arms trafficking, and the support base that exists for terror and insurgent groups, which destabilizes our northeast region. So Southeast Asia faces these major threats. Then, as you know, Myanmar is going through a major crisis. As we discussed yesterday, the crisis in Myanmar has escalated. We have received thousands of refugees into India, right? Even Myanmar soldiers have run into India recently, and India has deported them back. So Manipur and Mizoram, the border states, are very badly affected by the crisis going on in Myanmar because there is a refugee inflow into India. So this is another security crisis in the region, right? Then Southeast Asia has been a victim of terrorism and insurgency. Terror groups like Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, they have a presence from Indonesia to Thailand, Malaysia to Philippines. There are few local insurgent groups as well in some countries. So this is a common threat to everyone. Plus, maritime security remains a challenge, especially the rising aggression of China in South China Sea is a common security threat for these countries. So they would like to step up maritime security and ensure that freedom of navigation is protected in the Indo-Pacific. So to discuss all these security issues, ADMM group was formed, ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, that brings together the 10 defense ministers of ASEAN countries. Now, along with that, ADMM Plus meeting is also held. ADMM Plus. In this setup, the 10 ASEAN countries invite their 8 dialogue partners to participate in this defense ministers meeting. Is that clear? 8 countries, 8 major global powers have been recognized as the dialogue partners of ASEAN. Alright? Which are these 8 countries? It includes Australia, India, United States and South Korea, Japan, China, New Zealand and Russia. These are the 8 major powers recognized as dialogue partners of ASEAN. India got this status back in 1992 when we launched our Look East policy under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao government. In 1992, India was given the dialogue partner status to the ASEAN group. Is that clear? India became a dialogue partner of ASEAN in the year 1992. So since then, we have been engaging closely with ASEAN. So these countries which started a defense ministers meeting, they elevated this meeting to ADMM Plus in 2010. ADMM Plus meeting was started from 2010 onwards to discuss the security issues of the region, and 8 dialogue partners were also invited. So in ADMM Plus, there are a total of 18 countries, 18 defense ministers participating. You have your 10 ASEAN ministers and your 8 defense ministers from the 8 dialogue partners. So you have to remember the membership. It's very easy. In ADMM, you have 10 defense ministers from Southeast Asian countries, from the ASEAN members. In ADMM Plus, along with the 10 ASEAN defense ministers, 8 more defense ministers from the dialogue partner countries are invited. Is that clear? So India is a regular participant. These meetings, they previously would happen biannually, meaning once in 2 years. But from 2017, this has become an annual meeting. So in the last 6 years, the ADMM Plus meeting happens every year, where the 18 defense ministers of this region come together to discuss all the security issues of the region. That's why the topic is very, very important. Now let's look at the next article from page 13 that refers to the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is a very important international organization as far as prelims is concerned. According to the article, Armenia has taken a stand against Russia. It is unlikely to participate in the CSTO summit, which is going to take place next week. I'm sure you would have heard about Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. We have covered this in our Hindu analysis as well many times. We've discussed this topic in detail. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In this conflict, Russia, which is a major power in the region, has apparently sided with Azerbaijan. And recently, Azerbaijan gained full control of Nagorno-Karabakh and defeated the Armenian separatist groups. And Armenians have been driven out of this enclave, marking a big setback for Armenia. So both Armenia and Azerbaijan, they're former Soviet states. So naturally, Russia is very influential here. Now, right now, Armenia is upset with Russia as it has backed Azerbaijan and its full annexation of Nagorno-Karabakh. So as a result, Armenia has been acting against Russia. Recently, Armenia voted to join the International Criminal Court because right now, Russian President Putin has an arrest warrant against him for war crimes with regard to the war in Ukraine. So Armenia joined the International Criminal Court. The parliament voted to join the ICC to show a message of protest against Russia, and obviously ties between Armenia and Russia have been very severely affected. So there is this important security grouping in this region, in the Eurasia region, called CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. It's a Russia-led security grouping, just like you have NATO, which is a Western military alliance led by United States. Similarly, there is a Russia-led military alliance in the Central Asia, West Asia region, in the Central Asia, Eurasia region, right, which is the CSTO. So Armenia is a member, but it has said it will not participate in the summit which is happening next week. This is a big setback for Armenia and Russia relations. So you should know what is CSTO. It's an intergovernmental military alliance of 6 countries that came into effect in 2002. All right, the treaty was signed in 1992. 6 former Soviet states, after the disintegration of Soviet Union, after Cold War came to an end, they came together to form this security grouping. The CIS countries, the Commonwealth of Independent States, right, which were the former Soviet states, they came together with Russia, then Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. These 6 countries, they signed the Tashkent Treaty, the Tashkent Pact, which laid the foundation for Collective Security Treaty Organization, which fully came into effect in 2002. Few years later, even Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Uzbekistan had joined. Is that clear? So total of 9 countries, 9 former Soviet states had joined. Belarus, Georgia, Azerbaijan. They signed the treaty as well in 94, making this a 9-country grouping led by Russia. But when it was renewed and brought into effect in 2002, 3 countries have withdrawn. 3 countries have withdrawn from it. Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Uzbekistan have withdrawn from it. But however, the current members include Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan. These are the 6 current members of CSTO. So it's a military grouping just like NATO. Just like NATO has the principle of collective defense. Similarly, under Article 5 of NATO, where you have the principle of collective defense. Similarly, CSTO countries under Tashkent Treaty, under Article 4 of Tashkent Treaty, even they have a principle of collective defense. Meaning, if one of the member countries is attacked by a non-member, any aggression against a member country is seen as a collective attack on all the members. So they will collectively organize and mobilize their forces to defend the member country. Is that clear? So the principle of collective defense applies here, and they have committed not to resort to force against each other, and they're also prohibited from joining other military alliances. So it's a very important military grouping of the Central Asia, Eurasia region, and you have to be aware of this. Because many of these countries, they face instability, like Kazakhstan, for example, right? Even Kyrgyzstan, they face a lot of internal problems. So every time CSTO troops are deployed, just like NATO troops are deployed in collective operations, similarly, CSTO takes up collective security of the member countries. So please remember the member countries. There were 9 states before, 3 of them have quit. Azerbaijan, Georgia, Uzbekistan, they have not renewed it. Right now, there are 6 member countries that you see here. And Armenia has refused to participate in the summit that will take place next week. Next article on page 14 Very important article related to Indian economy. The government of India is looking to come out with auction bids for mining critical resources in India. That is lithium and graphite, and as well as rare earth elements. Even for rare earth elements and other critical minerals like lithium, graphite, then niobium, etc. They all have critical strategic applications in the industry, both in military and civilian domain. We already studied how these resources are found in very few countries. We have a deficiency of these resources. So to effectively mine and process whatever critical minerals we have, the government of India is coming out with an auction policy, and also it is planning a national strategy for mining and processing of critical minerals. Is that clear? Very few companies in India have the technological capability to mine and process these critical minerals, which is vital for various industries. Just around 10 to 12 players in India have the required technology and the capabilities to mine and process these important minerals. So to further enable the exploitation of these critical resources, the government is coming out with auction policy. The royalty fees is also being set. 3% royalty rate for lithium and niobium, 1% for rare earth elements. This is the royalty rate at which the government will raise revenue through these mining operations. So private companies will carry out the mining and pay royalty to the government at these rates. So a transparent, well-structured policy is being brought out, and the government is also thinking about a national strategy. It's looking to come out with a national strategy on mining and processing of these critical minerals. So this will advance India's pursuit of critical battery technology and other key technologies which will drive the future of the economy. Coming to the last article, on page 2 of the online edition, which is in the last section of the supplement of the e-paper, we have an important image related to environment and ecology. The image depicts these trucks, which you can see here, right, in Delhi, on the roads of Delhi. They are spraying water. If you can observe here, you can see a gun-like structure mounted on these trucks, and they are spraying something into the air, into the atmosphere. These are anti-smog guns deployed by the Delhi government to tackle the severe air pollution in the Delhi NCR region. You should know what are these anti-smog guns. How do they work? Are they really effective? Right? These anti-smog guns, essentially, they spray atomized water or nebulized water into the atmosphere. It's like a water cannon. It breaks down water into nebulas or atoms, right? It atomizes water into very fine particles and sprays them into the atmosphere. It is believed that atomized water, when it strikes the particulate matter and aerosols in the atmosphere, it can bind with them and bring them down safely to the surface, to the ground. Right? Air pollution is happening mainly because of vehicle emissions, as well as construction activity, dust, right? Stubble burning. So there is a lot of particulate matter and aerosols present in the atmosphere, leading to these severe smog and pollution conditions. So to manage the air quality, Delhi has been using this strategy, which is borrowed from China. China was the one which first deployed these so-called anti-smog guns. All right. The idea here is that when you spray water into the atmosphere, right, when you spray nebulized, atomized water into the atmosphere, it will bind with the fine particulate matter, with PM 2.5, PM 10 and other dust which is present, and it will bring them down to the ground level. Especially in dry, arid places like Delhi, this could potentially work in tackling the severe air pollution coming from vehicles, construction, etc. But however, this is unproven technology, right? Experts are divided on this approach, right? There is no proven evidence that it will work in combating air pollution, but repeatedly Delhi uses this strategy where anti-smog guns are deployed during the winter season to apparently bring down the pollutants to the ground. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's The Hindu newspaper. Please take up these 2 questions for your mains answer writing practice. Write the answers and post them in the answer writing portal, for which link is provided in the description box below. Also, join our Telegram channel. The link for Telegram channel also is in the description box of this video, because we have a quiz on these topics. You get to attempt 5 questions on all these articles we have discussed on our Telegram channel. So don't forget to join the channel as well. So with this, let me know how the session went. If you liked it, do press the like button, comment below, and share the video with others, and also subscribe to the channel. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.